Welcome back everyone, it is Mike from ManaHoarders. In this video we are bringing you a commander deck tech for a mono blue commander, Orvar the All-Form. You can cast Orvar for 3 and a blue, you get a 3/3 legendary shapeshifter. The first ability reads, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it targets one or more permanents you control, create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents. And the second ability, whenever a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard this card, create a token that's a copy of target permanent. Before we dive into the deck, let's go over a few key points. First up, the final price for this build came in at $87.88. This does include the price of our commander and all of our lands. Now do bear in mind some of these prices will vary greatly depending on the quality of the cards you purchase, the vendor you use, and a variety of other factors. In terms of power level, I'd rate this deck around a 6 out of 10 on the power scale. We are running a famous mono blue tribe, being wizards, but we do have plenty of other creatures that have powerful enter the battlefield abilities that we want to abuse as much as we can with our commander. We are also running plenty of instants and sorceries to abuse our commander's first ability to generate as much value as possible. This is also how we intend to win. We want to generate tons of value, hinder our opponents, and put ourselves in a strong position for victory. Now let's go ahead and dive into the deck. First up are our artifacts. We will be including 5 mana rocks for the sole purpose of trying to get our commander out as quickly as possible. Mind Stone gives us a colorless and potentially lets us draw a card. Prismatic Lens gives us a colorless. Sky Diamond comes in tapped and taps for a blue. Soul Ring taps for 2 colorless mana. And Thought Vessel gives us no maximum hand size and can also tap for a colorless. Moving on to our enchantments, Jace's Sanctum makes our instants and sorceries cost 1 less. Also, whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we can scry 1. Metallurgic Summonings, whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we get an XX artifact creature token where X is that spell's converted mana cost. We can also pay 3 and 2 blue, exile Metallurgic Summonings, and return all instant and sorcery cards from our graveyard to our hand, but we can only activate this if we control 6 or more artifacts. Shark Typhoon does something very similar, except we create a flying XX shark creature token where X is the spell's converted mana cost. Sigil of Sleep, whenever the enchanted creature deals combat damage to a player, we can return a target creature that player controls back to their hand. And Spellweaver Volute, we can enchant an instant in our graveyard, and whenever we cast a sorcery spell, we can create a copy of the instant and cast it without paying its mana cost. Moving on to our sorceries, Chart of Course allows us to draw 2, but we will have to discard unless we attacked with a creature this turn. Energy Tap allows us to tap a creature we control and then add colorless mana equal to that creature's converted mana cost. Ghost Form makes up to 2 target creatures unblockable. Open into Wonder makes it so X target creatures can't be blocked, and whenever they deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. Preordain will allow us to scry 2 and then draw 1. Quasi-Duplicate allows us to create a token that's a copy of target creature we control. With River's Rebuke, we can return all non-land permanents target player controls to their hand. Sleep will tap all creatures target player controls, and those creatures don't untap during that player's next untap step. Slip Through Space, it gives target creature unblockable, and we draw a card. Stealth Mission puts 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature we control, and that creature can't be blocked this turn. Moving on to our creatures, we do have some legends helping out our commander. Azami, Lady of Scrolls, we can tap an untapped wizard we control to draw a card. Baral, Chief of Compliance, makes our instants and sorceries cost 1 less. Also, whenever a spell or ability we control counters a spell, we can draw a card, and if we do, we have to discard. Gadwick the Wizened, whenever he enters the battlefield, we can draw X cards. Also, whenever we cast a blue spell, we can tap target non-land permanent an opponent controls. Naban, Dean of Iteration, if a wizard entering the battlefield under our control causes a triggered ability of a permanent we control to trigger, the ability triggers an additional time. And Talrand, Sky Summoner, whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we get a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. And for our not-so-legendary creatures, Aether Adept, whenever it enters, we can return target creature to its owner's hand. Archaeomancer allows us to get an instant or sorcery back from our graveyard to our hand. Battlefield Thaumaturge makes our instants and sorceries cost less, and whenever we cast a spell that targets it, it gains hexproof until end of turn. Cloudkin Seer will draw us a card whenever it enters. Docent of Perfection creates 1/1 wizards whenever we cast instants and sorceries, and if we have 3 or more wizards, we can flip it to Final Iteration, which pumps up our wizards and gives them flying. With Elite Arcanist, we can exile an instant from our hand, and then we can use his tap ability to keep casting copies of that spell. Exclusion Mage will return a creature an opponent controls back to their hand. With Galecaster Colossus, we can tap an untapped wizard we control and return target non-land permanent we don't control to its owner's hand. Whenever we cast an instant, we can pay 1, and Lunar Mystic will allow us to draw a card. Murmuring Mystic, whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we get a 1/1 blue bird creature token with flying. Niblis of Frost, whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we can tap target creature an opponent controls, and then that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Whenever we play a land when Royal Elemental is on the battlefield, we can gain control of target creature for as long as we control Royal Elemental. When Scourge of Fleets enters the battlefield, we can return each creature our opponents control with toughness X or less to its owner's hand, where X is the number of islands we control. Separatist Void Mage will enter and bounce target creature to its owner's hand. Shipwreck Dowser will enter and give us an instant or sorcery from our graveyard back to our hand. Silver Mirror can tap and give a blue mana to our mana pool. Tempest Caller, whenever it enters, we can tap all creatures target player controls. Wave Break Hippocamp, whenever we cast our first spell during each opponent's turn, we can draw a card. And Wind Rider Wizard, whenever we cast an instant, sorcery, or wizard spell, we can draw a card, and if we do, we have to discard. We are including 20 instants in this build, but we wanted to keep the mana curve relatively low so we can cast as many of them as possible in a single turn. Absorb Identity can return target creature to its owner's hand, and shapeshifters we control become copies of that creature until end of turn. Aetherize will return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. Cackling Counterpart will put a token that's a copy of target creature we control onto the battlefield. Chilling Trap gives target creature -4/-0 until end of turn, and if we control a wizard, we can draw a card. Crypsis will give target creature we control protection from creatures our opponents control until end of turn, and it will untap it. Dance of the Skywise, until end of turn, target creature we control becomes a blue dragon illusion with base power and toughness 4/4, loses all abilities, and gains flying. Decoy Gambit allows us to possibly bounce our opponent's creatures or draw some cards. Dive Down gives target creature +0/+3 and gains hexproof. Essence Flux, we can exile target creature we control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control, and if it's a spirit, it gets a 1/1 counter. Fated Infatuation allows us to make a token of a creature we control, and if it's our turn, we can scry 2. Ghostly Flicker allows us to flicker 2 target artifacts, creatures, and/or lands we control, then return them to the battlefield. Leap will give target creature flying until end of turn, and it will draw us a card. Mana Leak can counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. Museum Skin, target creature we control gets +0/+1 and gains hexproof. Negate will counter target non-creature spell. Opt, we can scry 1 and then draw a card. Shimmering Mirage, we mostly included this because it can target a land we control and thus create another land that is a token of that land with our commander's ability. It also lets us draw a card. Teferi's Time Twist allows us to blink a permanent we control, and if it enters as a creature, it'll get a +1/+1 counter put on it. Twisted Image will switch the power and toughness of target creature, we can also draw a card. Wizard's Retort, as long as we control a wizard, it costs 1 less and it allows us to counter target spell. And last but not least is our mana base. Fortunately for playing a monocolored deck, we can include tons of basics that will get the job done. We will be including 35 basic islands. And just like that, we reached the end of this Commander Deck Tech. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and tell your friends about us. Leave a comment down below and let us know what commanders you would like to see us build around in the future. We really appreciate your support.